and Lori and I are monitoring that. So as we see stuff pop up, Inman has several things. They have something almost every week. So I would definitely check out, if you want to attend something, look and see what Inman has going on that week. But Lori and I are keeping an eye out for like the major conferences to kind of get a feel. But none of them have really said whether they're, well, a couple of them are kind of leaning towards the virtual, but there are a few that I've talked to that still would like to go live. They're just not sure because it will be much later in the year. It'd be like the October timeframe. So they're not calling those yet for virtual. So as soon as we know something definite, we'll put it on the website under the events tab. But until then, if you hear of something before us, please share it with us and let us know.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I can understand waiting, the hope is herd immunity starts to take an effect, and shoot, by the end of the first quarter, we'll have 3 or 4 vaccines in circulation.
Right.
So this month's topic, what does 2021 hold for you? And more importantly, how do you take advantage of it, right? What should it hold for you? So we are going to get our crystal balls out, but a lot of it, I'm going to mute you, RG. A lot of it isn't necessarily prognostication, right? There's some really obvious things that we know are going on. There's some likely things that we expect to happen. So we kind of want to kick all of those around today and think through, okay, well, what is the impact of that on REO? What's the impact of that on the economy as a whole? And how can I position myself and my business to take advantage of it? So we'll make some predictions. We'll talk about some of the things we expect the government's going to do and how that affects us, and then what we could do or should do to pivot our business. All right. And as I mentioned before I started recording, I do want this to be interactive. So, each of us in our respective markets may have different regulatory influences at the state level. And then we obviously all have the same federal influences. So we're going to kind of kick them all around. So it's not rocket surgery, right? You ever heard people mix that? Rocket science, brain surgery, rocket. Am I the only one that thinks that's funny? All right. So we know the foreclosure moratorium has been extended, right? FHA has already extended it to the end of February. FHFA extended it from December 31st to January 31st, right? But we also know that the COVID Relief Act has already been written to extend it to March 31st. And if you read up on this stuff, when FHFA first extended it from December 31st to January, they said the impact on servicers would be between 1.1 and 1.7 billion. So that's in uncollected interest, right? And that's on top of the 6 billion that was already not collected over the previous X months, right? Because remember, the initial moratorium went into place on March 18th. So some of these borrowers haven't been paying for almost a year now, and that's painful for servicers, right? So we know the aid package is going to push it out to March 31st. And it's also pretty safe to assume it could be pushed further, right? So let's talk about, well, why would that be? We're all keeping our fingers and toes crossed for it to finally be lifted, right? But they keep extending it, which is disappointing for us. But what do you think their criteria is going to be if they were to extend it again, right? In my mind, it's 100% pandemic related, right? They are going to extend it if the vaccines and herd immunity aren't starting to get traction. They are not paying attention at all to the pain they're causing small businesses and landlords and servicers. All they're caring about is the person who's renting or paying their mortgage in their respective homes. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be paying attention to them, but all they're doing is making the pain for the rest of that equation greater. So come March 31st, what we should all be praying for is that the pandemic is subsiding, the curve is flattening, and the vaccine is working, or vaccines are working, right? And I know we've got 2 more vaccines that are in stage 3 of testing. Obviously, Moderna and Pfizer are already in distribution. So it is realistic and potentially possible that we could start to see that having an impact. And I hope we do. I'm sure all of us hope we do. So that's kind of the landscape, right? We have the moratoriums are continuing and will continue for 2 more months. But then what happens at the end of March? That's what we're waiting to find out. So what does all that do? Well, tenants can stay delinquent, right? And not worry about evictions. That means landlords are not collecting payments. That means landlords, you know, if the landlord has an underlying GSE mortgage, the landlord's probably in forbearance too if they're not receiving payments, right? So delinquent mortgages happen more, right? And if they aren't in a GSE mortgage, there's no pressure on private servicers to allow forbearance, so they could be screwed, right? And then what is aid going to look like? And how does Biden's election play into all that? You know, he's going to want to ride in on his white horse and save everybody. Well, that could mean further moratoriums. It also could mean greater aid. But one thing we do know, excuse me, is that the lenders are going to try and have workouts, right? They already have mitigation departments. They already know how to do this. They will staff them up whenever the moratorium gets lifted. Some of the servicers are already staffing up, or as you've heard on this call and others, they're moving asset managers out of asset management because they don't have assets to manage and moving them into mitigation and workouts because that's what they're facing, right? There's estimated last month 2.3 million homeowners that are 90 days down or greater, right? But the lender's waterfall is their sequence of offerings for workouts for that homeowner, right? So obviously the sequence is pretty well known. I think at this point, it's not pretty well adopted necessarily. It varies by servicer. But the sequence is the first thing they do is hold their hand out. And they say, okay, homeowner, you are 8 months delinquent. Go ahead and give me those 8 months plus January, so a total of 9 months. And then there's going to be a pool of homeowners that get that offer. And a very small percentage, very small, are going to have the funds to make that payment and get caught up immediately, right? So that's why it's a waterfall. So they'll make that request. Most people will refuse or be unable to take advantage of that request or offer. So then they go down to the next offering. Well, the servicer's next best alternative is going to be, okay, what if we take those 8 months and spread them over the next 3 or 4 years? So each month you're going to pay an extra 25% of your normal monthly payment so that you could be caught up in X months, right? Depends how far behind they are and what percentage they apply. But that is a way for, remember the pool of homeowners is this big. Well, there's going to be a percentage of those that say, yes, I could do that, right? My payment was $1,000. Now I'll pay $1,250 until I get that thing caught up. And they might negotiate, well, we'll give you 3 years. Can I have 5 years? Let's settle on 4 years, whatever, right? So that's phase 2. Phase 3 is the least attractive to the servicer. It's still better than foreclosing in their mind because they got a PR problem to worry about, right? If they offer forbearance to somebody in April of 2020 and then foreclose on them in April of 2021, that doesn't look good. So a certain percentage of servicers are going to say, if you say no to getting caught up, and if you say no to spreading it over the first 3 or 4 years or 5, what if we tack it on to the end? So instead of a 30-year mortgage, you're going to have a 31-year mortgage, right? So that homeowner who couldn't afford to pay $1,250 in my example would just pay $1,000 a month for a longer period. And statistically, wouldn't even pay it anyway because they'll refi or sell before that, right? But that's going to be the sequence of workouts that servicers are going to offer. And then failing all three of those options and maybe some other more creative ones, then they're going to initiate foreclosure, right? So if we initiate foreclosure, in most states, that means you're 3 to 4 months out before it actually gets completed and assigned to us, right? So if they push it to March 31st, which is pretty much a foregone conclusion, and don't push it any further, then that means August before those assets start hitting the street, right? And then if the Biden administration comes in and tries to intervene by offering some aid, it could delay it further, right? In the end, the servicers and the banks have the right to foreclose. They're just going to do it in as little a damaging way as they can to their PR, right? To their image. And so we have these next 6 to 7 months or more, if the moratorium gets extended, to do a couple of things. And that's what we want to kind of talk about today, right? Let me see. Hey, Fred.
Good morning. Good morning.
Everybody that turns their camera on floats to the top. So boom, there you are.
There you are.
And it helps me because I'm talking to a bunch of black squares and that's kind of boring for me. So I appreciate you turning that on.
I had problems with getting on the site here.
Oh, well, you made it. Thank you.
Finally, I figured it out.
And thank you, Sharon, for turning your camera on as well. All right, so what do we know? We know inventory right now is historically low. In our market, it's actually pretty interesting. Single families, we have under 1 month of inventory, right? So inventory is measured in weeks. As a real brief refresher, what we want is a balanced market. Well, that means 4 to 6 months of inventory. And by balanced, I mean sellers don't have leverage over buyers and buyers don't have leverage over sellers. It's in balance. Well, we're at 0.9 months of inventory. So that means we're in an acute seller's market. What's interesting is in the condo market, in our same market, there's over 6 months of inventory of condos. So we have an acute seller's market for houses, and we actually have a buyer's market for condos. So depending on which part of the market you're trying to appeal to, that you need to be aware of that, right? Like I list a lot of condos, but I have a totally different listing presentation when I'm meeting with them because most condo owners still think that there's less than a month of inventory. And they don't realize that, yeah, but that's not true for your condo. And here's the stats, right? There's 6.8 months or whatever it is. But in general, right, inventory is low. Interest rates are still at historical lows and will stay low as long as we're in a recession. The first sign of recovery will be rates starting to rise. And that's not going to happen for months. So take advantage of that, right? Interest rates give buyers greater buying power. That's part of why appreciation is so high, because low inventory will cause a group of buyers to bid on the same house. So they're already going to be aggressive, right? Use escalator clauses and the like. And then they're going to feel emboldened by the fact that their interest rate is in the 2s and they can afford to pay more for that property because their interest rate is so low, right? So transaction volume in our market, and probably most of yours, at least the people that I've been talking to around the country, is still very high because of that, right? So that's what ignites appreciation when you have all that activity and all that competition. But it's mostly retail, right? Not a lot of REO. I was checking HUD yesterday. In the entire state of Washington, there's one HUD home that's on the market right now, right? There's others that are pending, but it's, you know, it's scarcity just because of the moratorium, right? It makes sense. And we know FHA extended theirs to February, so we already know how much longer HUD's going to be if they don't extend it again. So what should we do, this group right here? Well, we got a 6 to 7 month head start to start our own PR campaign. We need to participate in coffee with clients, for example, get on the radar of all these companies so that they go, oh yeah, not all brokers are created equal. These guys and gals, they know what they're doing. They're going to help me succeed more. I go to 5-Star back when you used to, and I talk about results. I don't talk about how long I've been doing it and all this. I talk about the facts. My assets sell for more money, and that's why you should pick me. Do asset managers care about, right? Speed and results. So design a marketing campaign, a PR campaign that gets your face, your name, your city in front of these people on a consistent basis. Because when those assignments start to come, they want to be thinking of you, right? Now, obviously, hopefully all of you have a system of reminders for when your E&O expires, when your general liability expires, when your license expires, all that. Make sure all that stuff is current, right? It's not a bad idea to have a habit of, or a person in your office that checks all the portals a couple times a year to make sure that nothing is expired. Even more often than that if you're nervous Nelly like I am, right? I hate getting those emails that say, oh, you got something expiring. So make sure everything's updated. Then start your marketing or continue your marketing. Well, what does that mean, right? That means staying connected and in touch with asset managers and asset management companies. But at the same time, continue marketing for retail. Because I don't know about you, I closed 2 assets in December. That's the first month that I've had more than one REO closing in a particular month in like 2 years. And I told this story in a different call, but one of them I've been working on since 2016. It just happened to close in December of 2020. Holy cow, right? So if I want to, keep the lights on in my house, I got to sell retail. So it's a binary effort. Get top of mind with asset managers so when the time arrives, you get those assignments. And then keep driving retail leads. We've done plenty of Zoom meetings on how to generate retail sellers because that's the best lead to generate right now due to the low inventory, or condo buyers, right? Because we know that it's a buyer's market for condos, right? What else should you do? Well, update your profile. I don't know about you, but I was reading my my profile, the narrative part of my profile. I hadn't updated that thing in years. So rewrite it, jazz it up, let them know that you have cutting edge technology to help get exposure for their assets. It's always changing, right? On the marketing side, you should reflect that in your profile. Update your E&O, update your licenses, right? Now, how do you stay connected? Well, asset managers get emails, right? So you can wish them a happy new year. You can tell them, I think the most powerful thing you should be telling them is about your market, right? Because then they correlate you with, Arkansas in Monica's example, or wherever, right? Phone calls. You got to understand the recipient end of it, because some asset managers hate when their phones ring. Text them if you have their cell. But there's nothing wrong with a quick phone call to say, hey, let them know that you're there. Let them know that you're dominant in your marketplace. And if they need a free OC check, free BPO, free second opinion, whatever, you're there for them, right? These touches keep you top of mind in the minds of those folks. Doesn't hurt also to understand who does the assigning, right? Vendor managers, you should be doing the same campaign. Video is the easiest marketing to do. Video is also the scariest marketing to do. Most people have apprehension and video reluctance. Get over it. In the end, you sound like you sound, you look like you look. Shoot, look at me. I'm practically bald and I have 17,000 followers on Instagram because I'm not shy about looking like a fool online or on video. But I deliver value. I deliver content, right? I want them to know that when they have questions, man, reach out to Ed. He knows stuff when it comes to real estate. Market updates. I do a monthly market update. We can do a training on what I do and how I do it and how I distribute it. I have a checklist that's like 7 pages long, and I run through that checklist once a month, and I deliver a market update, and then I spread the good word around the internet. I can teach you all how to do that. Hopefully some of you are already doing something like that. But oh, Monica, I'm gonna mute you. But that's the number one way to stay top of mind and deliver news about your market, right? And it's just email. So I email that to every asset manager that just says, hey, here's an update on the Northwest market for January. And then they watch it or they don't watch it, but they still read the subject line and they thought, oh yeah, Ed's in Seattle, right? Text, if you get their cell numbers, social media. All of these folks are on social media. Like, comment, share, and they have to be meaningful comments. There's actually a definition of meaningful comments. It's 5 words or more. So don't just say, cool, good to see you. Say, oh my God, that looks like so much fun that you went, dirt track riding or whatever it is. But do all of this to remain top of mind, right? All right. Now I want to unmute people that I've muted because I want to hear what your opinions are. What do you guys think? Is the moratorium going to be over on March 31st?
I certainly hope so.
Sorry?
I certainly hope so. I was having this conversation with my team just a couple of days ago regarding this issue, and I certainly hope it is, because even though it is in a way to help the homeowners, at the end of the day, it doesn't, because so many of them are going to be precisely because of the solutions that you mentioned, the 4 solutions that you mentioned, that the banks will have regarding, pay all up front or extended for maybe, 12, 24, 36 months. They're never going to be able to catch up. Eventually, those are going to end up in foreclosures.
That's right. That's right. And please know this about me and how I feel about this whole group. I'm a decent man. I care about people. I donate money and time and lots of stuff to my community. I feel no guilt about foreclosures and representing banks, because in the end, the consumer signed on for an obligation. They weren't able to fulfill it. And I in 2008, because they postponed the solution for so long, they made it even worse. In my market, we had 67% of the listings in 2010 were distressed. That decimated the economy, right? 30% depreciation. So my personal belief is they're not doing a homeowner any favors by stalling the inevitable.
You're absolutely correct. And I also believe that a lot of homeowners took advantage of the situation, and they were able to pay their mortgage, and they decided to go the forbearance route. They got the funds and mismanaged those funds. And I've talked to a few people. I've been trying to stay up, abreast with all my database and my clients, and letting them know, if you don't need it, don't ask for forbearance. A lot of them took that money and did something else with them. There's so many new cars on the road. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it reminds me, Monica, of remember the LP siding settlement? And
Yes.
5-digit checks because of failed siding, and then they'd go to Hawaii or do something else, and there's still a bunch of homes that have crappy siding on them 20 years later.
I think the moratorium will continue. I think it's hard. The politicians hate taken away with, it's hard to take people off of free programs. An interesting story. I have a close friend of mine I've known for 40 years. They make about 40 grand passive a month in income just because of inherited trust funds and things. They put their mortgage on a forbearance. And I said, why'd you do it? He says, for entertainment. Plus, it was 6 months we could put the money in other stock investments. And he made money doing it. And and then now he's just going to write a check and pay his house off. So it was a game to them. But I think most people on these once they get used to not making the payment, will end up failing probably. And I think you're right. I think having a lot of REOs isn't going to happen. I think I mean, if you want to make it in default servicing, you better be able to do short sales. You better be able to do REOs. You better be able to handle all of it, because that's what's coming.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I'm
you know,
doing
I really do believe that. And short sales doesn't bother me, but I think we're a ways off. And especially in California, they're talking about, you know, they want to, and the governor's all for it, of course, extend the eviction moratorium for another year, till the end of this year. And when
For
you
a
get to
year.
the end of this year, there's going to be guys that want to do it again. It's just hard to take it away, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. And that is such a mistake. I mean, in the end. And I'm not, would I like to sell more REO? Of course. But my point is not, you know, tear the Band-Aid off because I make money. My point is, it's healthier for the economy that the foreclosures happen when they occur, rather than stockpiling them for 10 months or longer and then unleashing a tidal wave of them. So it's I mean, business can be good for us. We need to be ready for that. But this topic is when do we think it's going to start? So we got Monica saying, I hope March 31st. We got Mike saying, I doubt March 31st. Let's do other people think. No votes. I do think it's going to get extended again. I think we won't get enough progress on the pandemic and the vaccines for the politicians to have the confidence to say, okay, let's do it. It's almost like they are going to want to see a recovery out of the recession before they'll have that confidence.
It's going to really be more state by state. In Washington state, we've got a governor who has, before he became governor, had a real problem with property rights. And when he was an attorney, he fought against, evictions of people, and did a lot of that kind of work before he went on to Congress and then became our governor. And so I think the same thing's true in California. You've got a governor who's got a certain bent against property rights and against, homeowner, people owning. They've got an attitude that only large corporations and large, groups of people, very wealthy people own real estate other than their own house. And you're not going to change their mind on that. So in states where property rights are more important and still held more dearly, you're going to have the opportunity of the states to turn around and say, no, we're done with this. We see the negative side. But like I say, it's going to be state by state.
So can I say it back to you, Jim, a little differently and see if you agree that, I'm understanding. FHFA at some point is going to lift the moratorium. You're not really opining on when. What you are saying is when they lift it, still underneath that doesn't mean Washington State's going to say, yeah, it's lifted. They might jump in and say, nope, we're keeping the moratorium in our state.
Yep. You can expect it in Washington, Oregon, and California for sure. Idaho and Montana will open up, because they believe in, in our area, and I'm just talking about
property rights. Yeah.
I would assume Texas is going to open up more, because it's Texas. But like I say, it's going to be state by state.
Yeah, I definitely can see that, and it's out of fear, right? They're going to intervene because they're fearful it's too damaging to their constituents and their reelection bid.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with their reelection. I think it has to do with their belief of that the state should have more rights into property rights than individuals. And I think it goes into their and I'm not trying to talk politics, but I'm talking about the people who individually don't believe in real property rights. And, you know, you'd be surprised how many people really believe that the state should have more say on property rights.
Yeah. No,
I truly feel that the extended moratoriums are more of a political move than anything else. And so as much as we don't want to get into politics, politics is playing a huge part in this entire thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think it will for the foreseeable future. But
Yep.
my hope is that definitely we will get to a point where the states are the ones that get to decide, because what works for one state doesn't necessarily work for every other state.
that's the irony is that that's what the forefathers envisioned, but we have so much pressure to behave as a united states, right? Rather than give that authority to the state level.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the things I wanted to jump back to, this is kind of off topic a little bit, but it is something you talked about earlier when you were reminding everyone to make sure that they have their profiles updated. Keep in mind, and I'm telling you this from my days at Freddie Mac, that we considered agents that didn't keep their records updated as to be agents that probably wouldn't keep us all that updated through the process if they were handling our property. So if we had to follow up with you constantly to get a license or insurance or you know, complete training, then you kind of go to the bottom of the list. So it's super important that you're proactive with that. Don't wait for them to ask you. You know when you signed up, you know when your license expires, when your insurance expires. You need to make sure that you keep that stuff updated. Same goes with background checks. Some of the clients still require background checks. Most of them, I think, still do. And if that's the case, then you need to make sure you keep your background check updated as well.
yeah, great advice, and thanks for reminding us of the impression that we give people that make those decisions when we let
You
stuff
want to be
expire.
proactive, most
Yeah.
definitely.
So, is anyone like not taking action to generate business for themselves while we wait for the REO? I hope not. And we've been training in this monthly meeting about how to generate retail business, probably more than a lot of people would like, but the fact remains that the moratorium makes it imprudent to talk about how to do a good BPO, you know? So by all means, I teach and train and coach on marketing all over the country. By all means, reach out to me if you need help with something or are curious to know what systems we're using. We've enjoyed tremendous success and will continue because we monitor the market and we deliver what the market needs. Well, what the market needs today is listings. So if you don't have systems to generate listings, anyone on this call could probably help you. Everyone on this call would be more than happy to do so. So don't be shy. We really want it to be more like a mastermind in that regard anyway, because what works in my market probably will work in yours. You might have to add y'all to it or something in Sharon's market, but the messaging is still going to work. All right. Let me open it up now for questions before I shut off the recording. So this is questions about the content today, and then I'll shut off the recording and we can answer other questions outside. But any questions about 2021, things you could and should be doing to be in good position for when the REO does return? Or did I do such a great job that we don't need to? Somebody's got a crackling going. All right, well, I'm gonna stop the recording. And, oh, we got a chat. I'm working with investors right now and I complete BPO reports for a few different companies. I knew when I said training on BPOs, someone would say, well, I'm doing BPOs. I just got an order for one. I'm with you, Laura. I was being facetious.